दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ रखना। ये वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क वफा रखना। इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome once again to Friday Sermon for Kids. Coming to you from the Vancouver Bureau of MTA International Studios, Canada. Joining me today are my two young brothers, Arslan and Arib. Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Wa alaikum assalam.
We have a lot to unpack today. Are you guys ready to dive in?
Definitely. Today there's so much to talk about.
Exactly. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack from this week's Friday sermon.
Huzoor went into great detail this week on the return from the Battle of Uhud with the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his companions, and the compassion that the Holy Prophet showed to all those people that had lost loved ones in such a dangerous battle. So before we begin, let's take a quick look at a clip from this week's sermon.
मुस्लिमों ने बयान फरमाया है कि जब मदीने में दाखिल हुए तो चूँकि ज़ख्मों की वजह से आपको लकाहत ज़्यादा थी, इसलिए सहाबा ने सहारा देकर आपको सवारी से उतारा। मगरिब की नमाज का वक्त था, आपने नमाज पढ़ी और घर तशरीफ़ ले गए। मदीना की उन औरतों को जिनके रिश्तेदार जंग में शहीद हो गए थे, उनकी ख़बरें पहुँच चुकी थीं। उन्होंने रोना शुरू कर दिया। आप सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने जब ये औरतों के रोने की आवाज़ें सुनी तो आपको मुसलमानों की तकलीफ़ का ख्याल आया और आपकी आंखें डुबडुबा आईं।
Okay, before we begin, what was something you guys learned this week?
Yasir Bhai, something that I have learned from this week's Friday sermon is that there was a lot of people martyred in the Battle of Uhud.
And something that I learned from this week's Friday sermon was that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was also injured.
Wonderful points, guys, and we'll be discussing that in today's episode. Okay, let's begin our discussion. How would you like to start, Arib?
Well, beloved Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, started by telling us that the Holy Prophet ﷺ prayed for the families of martyrs of Uhud.
You're absolutely right. So Huzoor went into great detail and explained to us the condition of the Muslims after the Battle of Uhud, and how after such a difficult battle where so many of their friends and families' lives were lost, how they came home and how they recovered.
Wasn't this the war where the Holy Prophet ﷺ was injured?
And at one point, didn't the people in Medina thought that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was murdered?
Yes, this is that war.
That must have been scary for everybody. But how did the Holy Prophet ﷺ deal with the situation? And what did they do after coming back to Medina?
Yeah, this was a really emotional time for the Muslims. They were happy to have won the war, but they were really sad for all the loved ones that they had lost. And when they reached Medina, one of the mothers, the mother of Hazrat Muaz, she ran out to greet them. She was so happy that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was still alive. And even in his moment of pain and having gone through this very dangerous battle, he comforted her and he let her know that her son had reached such a high level in paradise with his martyrdom.
Yeah, I remember Huzoor mentioning that basically the way how he comforted her is by telling her that her son is in paradise.
Exactly. And Hazrat Muslim Maud has written about this, how at a time where the Holy Prophet ﷺ had his own injuries, had lost his loved ones, had lost so many of his companions in this war, instead of thinking about himself and all the pain and the trouble that he is going through, all he could care for were those that were already there in Medina who were worried. Because you have to remember, the Muslims had gone through this very dangerous battle and they had had a lot of people that were martyred. So his main focus at that time was to make sure that everyone that is here with us now, how do we make them comfortable? How do we take care of them? How do we give them any form of happiness at such a troubling time?
Yeah, Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, also mentioned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had such humanity for the people in Medina, but he was still going through so much emotional and physical pain, but he still had so much humanity for the people in Medina.
Exactly. Only someone like him had the faculties, had that ability to think of others and everyone else around him in such a troubling time for himself. Right? That is another proof and another sign of his greatness.
I remember Huzoor mentioned that there was someone else who the Holy Prophet ﷺ reassured.
Yeah, I think it was that woman who lost 3 of her relatives.
Yes, exactly. So Huzoor mentioned Hazrat Hamna bint Jahash. She had 3 family members that she lost in that battle. When the Holy Prophet ﷺ came to Medina and he spoke to her, he mentioned to her that her uncle had passed away, that he had been martyred in the battle. And she said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun, which is what we all say. To Allah we belong and to Allah we will return. He then continued and said, also, your brother was martyred in this battle. And again, she said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun. He then mentioned that her husband passed away. And at this point, she started to cry.
She lost her uncle and her brother. But why did she only cry when she lost her husband?
So the Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned at that time that our blood relatives are important to us. But the love that a wife has for her husband is on another level. So she, of course, cried for that. And also, that husband was the provider, the guardian, the caregiver for that family. So she was worried about her 2 sons and who would take care of them.
And that's where the Holy Prophet ﷺ prayed so that they would have a better guardian than their father, right?
Exactly. And later on, their mother ended up marrying Hazrat Talha, one of the most noble companions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And it's been written and said that he took better care of those 2 brothers than even the son he had later on with her.
It's amazing how the Holy Prophet ﷺ's words are so blessed.
Yasir Bhai, in the prayer of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, I believe Huzoor used the word khabargiri. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's a good thing we have Misbah to tell us what khabargiri exactly means. Over to you, Misbah.
Alright, so this week's word is khabargiri. Well, there are actually 2 Persian words. Khabar, which means news, and giri, which means to gather or collect. This can also mean to ask about someone or see how someone is doing. Based on that can also mean to be someone's guardian, because a guardian or someone who does khabargiri is someone who cares for you. I hope that was simple enough. Back to you, Yasir Bhai.
MashaAllah, that was such a great explanation of what khabargiri means. Jazakallah ahsanal jaza. So boys, Huzoor mentioned how the Holy Prophet ﷺ took such great care of all those that had lost loved ones in the Battle of Uhud, and how he prayed that all of them received such good guardians, the best guardians, later on in life.
What about the close relatives of the Holy Prophet ﷺ who were martyred?
Yeah, weren't the foster brother and the uncle also murdered?
Yes, so Huzoor mentioned that after reading Maghrib Namaz and returning home to rest, the Holy Prophet ﷺ could hear all the women that were crying and mourning for their lost loved ones. And these were all those people that were of Medina. His uncle and his foster brother were not from Medina. They were Meccans that had migrated there with him. So he actually had tears in his eyes. And he said, who will mourn for my uncle and my brother, right? And at that moment, there were some companions who heard him. And they immediately ran out and they told those women, hey, you must also mourn at the home of the Holy Prophet ﷺ.
Why weren't they mourning over the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's relatives?
Well, they weren't from Medina, they were from Mecca. And the people of Medina, they were mourning in their way. Because Medina was a different place from Mecca, they had slightly different ways of doing things. So they were mourning their own people, not the people of Mecca.
Yes, so what happened then?
So when all those women that were mourning for the people of Medina, they came over to the home of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, they started mourning there. And at that moment, the Holy Prophet ﷺ said to them, it is okay to cry, it is okay to mourn, but don't go to such extremes, which was the Medina custom, right? The way that they would mourn. And he wanted them to have some control over themselves and to mourn in a way that has some dignity in it for the person you are mourning for, right? So he gave them a teaching there. And also, by doing this and by having them mourn for his relatives, he again reminded us that he wanted the people there to not just mourn for their own loved ones, but for all of those that they had lost in the Battle of Uhud.
That's amazing. He didn't want anybody to feel left out.
Exactly. But I almost left out that we have to do the question of the sermon. So, are you guys ready?
Yeah. I was actually prepared for this segment.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Welcome to Question of the Sermon. Okay, boys. This week's question is, what is the purpose of the stories that were narrated this week by Huzoor? Was it A, to share with us the blessings of Islam? B, to tell us some lessons and wisdom? C, to tell us historical facts? Or D, tell us battle stories from Islam? You guys have 10 seconds. Let's think it over. Okay, 10 seconds are up. Reeb, what's your answer?
I think it's C, historical facts.
I think it's B, lessons and wisdom.
You're both correct, but the true answer is lessons and wisdom. These are historical facts, and they are very important, but it's what we can learn from them that is most important. So, all these things that Huzoor mentioned in his Friday sermon are lessons to us. They teach us about how compassionate and how noble the Holy Prophet ﷺ was, that even when going through his own troubles, he thought of others first and how to take care of them, right? He showed compassion at such a delicate time.
Speaking of delicate time, didn't Huzoor also talk about the need to pray for the current situation of the world?
Yeah, it seems things just keep escalating.
Yes, Huzoor reminded us again that we need to increase our prayers because there's so much turmoil going around, right? And Huzoor also mentioned that we need to be praying for the Muslims, that hopefully they can band together and have unity in these troubling times.
Well, this brings us to our closing review. Let's quickly recap of what we've discussed today.
We learned that the Holy Prophet ﷺ, after the Battle of Uhud, continued to comfort people and prayed for them for a better guardian.
Beloved Huzoor has mentioned in all of these narrations that there are lessons for ourselves and we should try to follow the examples of the Holy Prophet ﷺ.
Beloved Huzoor, may Allah be his helper, reminded us once again to pray for the worsening situation in the world. He also prayed for two members of our Jamaat that had recently passed away, Murabi Ghulam Ahmad Naseem Saab and Dr. Ihsanullah Zafar Saab.
Guys, make sure to always watch Huzoor's full Friday sermon.
And until next time,
Khuda Hafiz.
मगर है शर्त तुमसे मुसलसल राबता रखना मगर है शर्त तुम उससे मुसलसल राबता रखना इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क़ वफ़ा रखना इमाम वक्त से एक रिश्ता इश्क़ वफ़ा रखना